Oh, hi there. Dave Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild here. Hey, you ever have one of those days where you sit down and you're ready to run your favorite role-playing game, and come to find out only one or two people are actually able to make it to your session? What do you do? Well, I know a lot of DMs would just throw in the towel at that point and cancel the game. But, I don't think you have to, and quite frankly, I think if you throw in the towel at that point, I think you're missing a golden opportunity for something better. All right, so stick around and I'm going to talk to you all about running with one. Running for one. Now, why may you have an occasion to run a role-playing game for just one person? Well, it's possible that he or she is your only player. No one else can make it to the game, or you don't know anybody else. So you end up running for just strictly one person. Or if you're playing a game with more than one player, let's say the typical 4, it's quite possible that everybody else couldn't make it, so it's just you and that other player. And it doesn't matter if there's a larger party in addition to this one person, or if it's just the one person. What's really nice about running a one-on-one game is the fact that this player gets all of your attention, and they're going to be focused on you the entire time. Now, seems a little weird sometimes, seems a little awkward when you first start, but once you get into the game, and it doesn't take too long, you get sucked into the world. So now it's not just you and one other person, it's a whole world, it's a whole universe again. And you can spend as much time role-playing as you want. You can spend plenty of time delving into that character's backstory, and that player can role-play to his or her heart's content, negotiate with merchants, and take on whatever tasks or whatever quests come their way without clearing it with anybody else, and can do all the problem solving themselves and experience and try things that maybe normally in a group setting they may be unable to or are too shy to do. And this makes your job as Dungeon Master a whole lot easier because it is only the one player. It's easier to predict what they're going to do versus the group, and also too, it eliminates the fact that you may have a wild card in the group who may suddenly go left when everyone else is going right and want to do things at the most inopportune time. One player is much easier to wrangle. And again, you can also elaborate upon that character's backstory and put them in situations where it might require more problem solving on their part versus a whole group where it might be really easy for them to, with their powers and abilities, might be harder for you to back them against the wall or in a certain corner to give them a certain feel. Whereas you have one singular player with one class, and then it's a lot easier to kind of challenge that player versus a very diverse group. Sometimes it's harder to challenge that diverse group of players. Now, running one-on-one can also be pretty rough because you have to tailor all the encounters specifically to one person, which isn't bad, but you don't want to kill them right out the gate. If you want them to have fun, and they're going to want to have fun, you need to make sure you pull back on your encounters a little bit and make it to where it's still challenging. Maybe they go fight 4 or 5 skeletons, but those skeletons, they need to only have 1 or 2 hit points each, especially if they're doing their normal damage, and especially if that character is real low level. Is this kind of a problem? It is, but it's not, because you can adjust accordingly. Now, should the player still possibly die? Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of instances where, if they just make a bad decision, they make a bad decision and they die. Although, there are fates worse than death, like being permanently scarred or injured, or perhaps a caster who, instead of dying, you say, look, instead of dying, you can take a fate worse than death. Are you willing? And maybe that person says, yeah, sure. So that character is later found by some NPCs, and they take them and they heal them back to health. However, there's a permanent scar. They're permanently damaged. In the case of a magic user, perhaps their arm or hand is hurt in such a way that they can no longer perform the somatic components, the gestures that are required for the spell work, and they must willingly give up perhaps a cantrip or level 1 spell, and that is gone forever because they cannot perform that particular action in order to cast that spell. just as an example. Or perhaps maybe they're injured and they don't run as fast, so you deduct 5 feet per round on their maximum movement. Or you could even go so far as to adjust an attribute score. But it better be a pretty good reason to adjust the attribute score, because you don't want to ruin someone else's character and take all the fun out of the game. So if a player gets injured in any way or is going to die, it's a lot harder for that player to keep themselves alive when in a group another player could easily pour a healing potion down his throat or pull them away or spare the dying and keep them from dying. So it's definitely going to be a lot harder. Also too, if there's any kind of quest that the player has to do or has to go take care of something, it's possible that it might take a really long time for that one singular player to resolve his quest or his task or to go retrieve an item. Whereas with a group of players, it might easily take an evening. Although also at the same time, with one player, that player has full control of what's happening. So if the player decides he wants to negotiate his way through something or be very sneaky and try something unconventional and finish his quest that way, and it just might work out. Whereas sometimes in a group, I've seen a whole group of players try to do something sneaky and then one guy is just ready to fight, so he decides to kick in the door and go at it, and all the players are like, oh, we were almost there. Or someone who is maybe of noble upbringing is able to kind of negotiate his way into a certain situation and almost has it resolved when some other player decides, you know, I think I'm just going to steal something here right now, instead of just completing the mission and then stealing something later once this big mission is over. And then when he does that, messes everything up. But I still think having only one player in the game is an excellent opportunity to, again, allow that player to role play and to really kind of find their character and get that connection going. And I think that's really important. And also, too, with one player, you can build up suspense a little better because you're constantly interacting with that one character, especially if you're looking for a thrill element or a real horror element, something like that nature. I think it can really help amplify that with having just that one person versus the whole group. Although if you do it right, you can still do the same thing with the whole group, but you really got to be on the ball and really keep everybody engaged. With one person, it's harder to keep them engaged. I'm sorry, I take that back. With one person, it's easier to keep them engaged versus a whole group because you're bouncing around everybody. And something else that works out well too is with this one person, you're developing backstory, and just the sheer fact that they're playing through their own game, if they do join up, if another player, say, joins the group later, or if they're part of a bigger group, next time they meet, that player might have information or experiences that can help the rest of the group later on. He might say, they might be passing through someplace, a certain town, and that player might be like, oh my God, I was here just last week. Remember last time when I was the only one that was able to show up? We went ahead and ran a one-shot, and I was in this town. Oh my gosh, let me tell you some things. And the players are going to be all ears, and I don't need to prompt the player to say, oh, you made your skill check, and this is the information you have, and that player immediately regurgitates it to the other players. No, this time that player actually has a foundation of information from a game he played all by himself that he can pass along to other characters. So instead of looking towards me, the other players can look at that other player who had that adventure and get the information from him, while I can sit in the background and watch it unfold and take notes and modify accordingly if I need to. A lot of DMs are hesitant about breaking off one or two players and doing something while the other players aren't there. And a lot of other players are hesitant about doing something when the other players aren't there because they're worried, what's going to happen to me? Is this going to hurt the game? Is everybody else going to be mad at me? What if someone has to pull my fat out of the fryer? No one's going to be there to help me. Well, it's okay. It's okay. Sometimes in the early days, you just have to kind of reassure my players, say, look, this isn't going to be bad, but this is a good opportunity for us to play without the other players because the game's going to run a little faster because it's only the two of you instead of the whole party, and we can get some other cool stuff done. And I'm going to try to wrap it up, nice and neat, so the next time we meet, as long as everybody can make it, we can all still be together and keep playing the game. I try to reassure my players that, so that way they know there's not going to be any weird jankiness, because I do want to keep a nice coherent flow, and I don't want to have to resume the next week's game with maybe the 2 players that had their own, kind of one-on-one with me, now have to wait while I catch everybody else up. Now, I try to make sure to keep everybody active in the game and make sure if I do go off with 1 or 2 other players in, say, a 4-person group, I do try to make sure to come back and get those players back so they're ready to go with everybody the next session that we meet. Now, so DMs are hesitant to do this, but again, I just believe it's a really good idea. And there are very few instances, I believe, where you can't peel off 1 or 2 other players for their own little side adventure. Now, of course, there might be certain instances where, let's say, you were literally in the middle of everybody sneaking into an enemy compound, or rescuing somebody from a dungeon, or they're fighting their way through this gauntlet of enemies, or they're underground and they can't go back because all the traps have sealed off the tunnels, and going forward, well, they got to go right through a cave of enemies. It can be problematic, granted, and it can throw the storyline out of whack if you need everybody there. However, most of the time, in my experience, and I've been playing and running games for a really long time, I've noticed that it's not too far of a stretch to break players off to have a quick one-shot. Players need to rest, they're camping, and you say, well, you guys camp an extra day, you guys were going to take off today, but you decide to camp an extra day. Most of my games aren't super time sensitive, at least not time sensitive enough where I can't give an extra day here or there for the players. So I say, you guys were going to leave, but you decide not to. You decide to stay an extra day because one of the other players isn't feeling well. And, you or the both of you go off to go hunting, or you hear a ruin, or you see a caravan in the distance and you want to go check it out. There's any number of reasons. Or maybe they have a part of a map or a book, or a mentor told them something. Oh man, my mentor's around here, or I got family around here, I should go check it out. Or just a chance encounter with some NPCs. An NPC could come by and see their camp and begin talking to them. It's like, well, I've got some problems, I'm a farmer in this area, and I was just going back home. I was trying to hunt this wolf, and it's been preying on my sheep. I need some help. Can anybody help me? Well, we all can't go, but we can spare these 2 guys or just this one person. And hence you get a reason to break that 1 player away. And then you have just a real short, simple one-shot. And basically that's all you're doing is inserting a one-shot right into the game, so that way that player can go, that player or players can break off, have a small adventure, and come back. And sometimes they might come back with an added bonus, maybe more treasure for everybody, maybe a magic item, or a special scroll or potion, who knows? Or just a little more experience and maybe a contact in town now. Somebody friendly to them. Even underground, I think I'm going to go scout out this way and see if there's anything down here, and I'll come back and then let you guys know. You just let them break off. Super easy. In town, it's real easy. The big thing is you got to remember, when you let people, or when you take people and you split them off like that, you got to make sure that you get them back right where they started. So that way, if they, let's say you're a group of 4 people, only 1 can show up, and they were camped for the evening. Then you say, well, that 1 player breaks off and does something. But you got to make sure for the next session, he's right back with the group again, so you can continue on. Or, this is something else that I've done, you can also say, if he doesn't get back with the group, you can say at the next day, or the next session, everybody wakes up, you notice one of your guys is gone, and you know that he went back to town for something, or he went to go check an old ruin, or whatever the case may be, because he told you so or left a note, and you guys immediately get up, pack up, go, and I shortcut it. I get them there real quick. There's no real major travel time. They just go, they get there, they find the old ruin, they track him up there, automatic success, because it's not like he's trying to lose his own players, he's not trying to hide from them. And they see the secret passageway went into, they go down there, and boom, everybody's in combat, everybody's reunited, and they wrap up whatever it is we need to wrap up, and then they move on. Or maybe there's something interesting here for everybody to poke around and find and be a part of. So there's a number of things you can do. The big thing is, whatever it is that you do with those one or two other players while the other ones aren't around. Keep it simple, keep it light, so that way you can get yourself back out of it and get everybody back reunited. Because one thing I hate is seeing players sit at the table waiting on everybody else. This drives me crazy. And matter of fact, as an aside, like the donning and doffing rules, like you have several characters who wear armor, and suddenly there's, let's say, an attack on the inn. Players under attack, everybody else is under attack. These bandits are running around, and it takes a little bit of time for you to don armor. And depending on the kind of armor it is, it can take forever, and the players are really vulnerable. Well, I bend those rules because if I have to wait for a player to don armor, typically the battle could very well be over by the time they put their armor on and get downstairs to help. And I know that's kind of the point of it. That's why there's the time limits and it's a little harder to do. But usually, I just trim that down for a turn or two. Or I say, hey, it's going to be a little while. You grab your shield and you grab a breastplate off your plate mail and throw it on. Does it work like that? Probably not. But I give them a little extra armor bonus and get them downstairs to fight. But I definitely tell them it's going to be a little bit of time while they're putting their armor on, but I don't penalize them for the whole time because, for a minute or even 2 minutes of game time, putting on your armor, when you're actually playing, especially with a lot of people, that's, combat, 2 minutes of actual fighting in the game can end up being 20 or 30 minutes of sitting there at the table waiting around while you put your armor on. And a lot of times in those cases, sometimes I will send a low-level threat specifically to go fight those people so at least they have a chance to get in on the combat. So they can still feel threatened and feel like they're doing something, but yet they're not going to miss out on anything. And I've had that happen before where players are sitting in an inn and suddenly at night, basically assassins break in to kill them and everybody breaks up, start fighting. The magic users can cast their magic and protect themselves. Other people like monks or barbarians are kind of okay already, but your fighters, they got to put their armor on. Rangers, they got to put their armor on. So these guys are going to miss out while they're trying to put everything on, and they're going to feel really useless and not like they're part of the game. And you could say, well, they shouldn't take those classes then, but that's not what the game's about. The game is about playing what you want to play, about role playing. So again, what I'll do in these kind of situations is I'm not going to worry about the donning armor rules quite as much. I'm not going to be so hardcore about that time limit. I'm going to say you're putting your armor super fast, your adrenaline's pumping. I know what it says in the book, but you're a fighter, you're experienced, you know how to do this stuff. You're proficient in it, so you're going to get that armor on and get downstairs as quick as you can. Or you can say, look, I can get you down there right now. You can go ahead and start doing what you want to do, but I'm going to penalize your AC because you just throw some quick bits of armor on just to give you some quick protection. Like you grab maybe you grab a couple of gauntlets, get your shield, throw your helmet on and go downstairs and hope that's enough to protect you. So I might give you a little AC bonus, or again, I might have some guys just bust into your room and fight you in the buff right before you put on your armor. I mean, why not? But now, of course, these guys that bust in, they're going to be low-level guys. They're going to be probably as commoners, and they're going to have weapons appropriate for the situation. Swords, daggers. And again, if this is a level 1 character these guys are fighting, I'm going to kind of pull back a little bit, maybe on the damage output. But then again, if the player is, say, maybe a 3rd or 4th level, then their damage output is fine, but I'll keep their hit points low, so that way the player's got a chance, but still feels threatened, and he's going to get injured. And of course, there's always that natural 20 the bad guys could throw, or they could just happen to roll really good damage, and that player could get taken down a notch, or even killed. The threat's very real. The danger is there, but the whole point is keeping everybody engaged. And I think that's the most important part about role-playing that a lot of DMs miss out on, is keeping people engaged. And that's what you want. And that's why running for one, to me, is really important, because you are keeping that one person engaged that whole time. And it's really valuable because you can really add a lot of richness to your world through the eyes of that one player. And then when you add more players, or when you reunite that player with the rest of the group, he has a story to tell, and he has more experience now, so it's almost like he's kind of running part of your game for you. And if you get the chance, maybe you could say, hey, tell you what, I've got some free time on Tuesday. I need 1 or 2 people to come do a quick one-shot. Who's down? And then you could do the same thing for those guys. Would you do it all the time? Nah, not necessarily. Would I do it all the time? Nah, just because it does take a lot of time. But if you had some free time, you could totally get those guys together, or even just get one person and do that again. Like maybe once a month you could do that for somebody. And I think that'd be really cool. And then they have these extra stories and they get a little more spotlight time. And I know a lot of people love the right background, a lot of background on the characters. And sometimes it's kind of nice to really delve into that. In a group game, it can be kind of hard to cover everybody's backstory and make all these deep personal connections and make them seem believable. I usually tend to treat backstories as personal motivations for the players. You know, that's more for them than me. But also, I always read over them and say, I may or may not use what you have in your background, because there's so many, even with just 4 people, even with 3 or 4 people, I'm like, look, there's, in addition to the game that I'm going to run, I might not be able to get to your backgrounds. So I want you to guys keep that in mind and not feel bad if I don't use any of the material. But this material is good for me to know because it may come up. Or if you want to ask about your background, see if any of it relates at a certain point in the game, man, I'm down for that. But I might not be able to fully use everything you write. But running for 1 allows you to elaborate on that, or even 1 or 2. Because honestly, if you've got 2 players, and only 2 players, and they end up exploring one player's background story, that's okay because the other player is right there. So you're going to have both of their attentions, even though you're only really working with one player. That other player is going to be there to help back him up and will be interested to see what exactly is going on with this player. And who knows, by being there, the extra player may be able to help out with that character's backstory in a very specific way. So I think running for 1 can really be a good idea, and I don't think it's a showstopper at all. And I mean, you're there to game, you already made the time. If only 1 or 2 people show up to your game, man, you should do something. Now, true, again, like I said earlier, it's possible that by just running the game for 1 or 2 people could really throw things off. But I think more often than not, if you really take a look at what you're doing, you can usually squeeze in some kind of small one-shot or little side adventure right there for that 1 player or 2 players that are able to make it. And that's kind of a nice reward as well. Since they were able to make it, I think it's just awesome that they get a little more game time. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this little look at running with 1. Again, I really think it's a good idea, and I think you're missing out if you don't do it. Will it work in all situations? No, but I do think in a number of situations you'd be surprised at how well you can make things fit in and add to your game. So I'm David Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, thanking you for watching this episode of The Art of the Master. And be sure to share this video if you like it, and be sure to subscribe. So I want you to stay safe, play great games, and I'll see you real soon.